Coming up on This Week in Penn State Football, Greg Pickel and I are going to talk about spring questions involving Penn State's wideouts, what else is new, the offensive guards, and maybe some true freshmen who can make an instant impact in 2020. Penn State Blitz podcast resumes after a lengthy break. It wasn't that lengthy. I'm Bob Flounders in the studio, the new studio, with Greg Pickel, and we're going to close this out, Greg, with some spring questions for the Penn State program. Spring practice is not that far away. They're still doing winter conditioning, getting bigger, faster, and stronger. But there's always questions. This is a talented team despite the losses, and let's throw some questions around here. Let's talk about maybe some wideouts. Let's talk about some intriguing options at the offensive guard position. And we got to talk about true freshmen because we always talk about true freshmen because you just never know who's going to step up and be the star of the show or one of the stars of the show in the fall.
Yeah, so we talked earlier a little bit about the group that Taylor Stubblefield inherits. Yeah. And if you missed that, it's earlier in this podcast, the Penn State Blitz, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your audio, like, rate, and subscribe. Also, the earlier video we did, which is at youtube.com/allpennstate. But now the question I'll ask you is this. This will be how many spring practices have you covered now?
Oh, my. Well,
just ballpark it.
Technically, I started in 2002, but after spring practice. So, I'm closing in on 20. It's
okay.
Like 19.
So, over that many spring practices, if someone comes up to you then in May and says, Bob, do the receivers look any better than they did before spring practice? What can you look for to give a hint? Because we see more now than you saw before in the Paterno and O'Brien eras, but you're still talking a couple practices a week, some interviews, and the blue-white game.
Yeah, I hate to say it because especially in the blue-white game, some of the better players either don't play at all or they don't play very long. Mm-hmm. I will say that since this is James Franklin's 7th year, and I would say he's been fairly candid and honest about players who have made strong moves during spring practices. You can look back to his first spring when he was singing the praises of Sam Ficken. And Sam Ficken, up until the 2014 season, had not been very consistent at Penn State. He had a very consistent final year. He made the big kick to start the year in Ireland. He was pretty clutch the whole rest of the way, including, I believe, in the Penn State Bowl. And then, Kevin Givens. He talked about Kevin Givens as a breakout player. He turned out to be. So he's usually fairly candid and pretty honest, Greg. So he will be, because he brought up the wideouts, and he wasn't necessarily critical, but this is what we need to do better, and he doesn't usually do that. He got right to the point. He's going to be asked about the wideouts at every opportunity, and I just think you have to pay attention to the guys he's mentioning other than Jahan Dotson, because I think there are some young players, maybe some players who were redshirted last year, that can help them right away, and I think this is a huge spring for Daniel George because they continue to bring in talented players, and you only get so many bites at the apple or so many chances to have bites at the apple. This is going to be his third year in the program. He certainly looks great, but he's got to be more consistent catching the football. I just think that I'm going to let James Franklin let me know, and maybe Kirk if we get a chance to talk to him. I'm going to let that. Usually they will kind of point us in the right direction. Yeah,
Sean Clifford has the kind of personality that he might be willing to, like Trace McSorley, give you a couple ideas. Sure. So Trace McSorley threw out Justin Shorter's name, so take it for what it's worth. All right.
That's his mulligan.
Yeah, that's right. Guards, looking at the guard picture, C.J. Thorpe, Mike Miranda back, are either challenged for a job or is it they penned into those two spots?
Hey, they've worked long and hard. They've developed very nicely. They're classmates. I can remember when Mike Miranda redshirted, didn't redshirt. He enrolled early, and I think they actually did redshirt him. But James was talking about him right away. He was a physical player, wasn't afraid to mix it up with some of Penn State's veteran defensive linemen. And I think that the fact he can play guard or center makes him a very, very underrated performer on this team. If anything would happen to Michael Mennett, he's the guy. They're both going to play. They're both going to play a lot. I'll be curious to see who the third guard is. Caden Wallace is a guy that I think Penn State recruited as a guard, but it sounded like they liked him a little bit more at tackle. There's probably another. I think Salim Worley is maybe another guard prospect we can watch out for. But I'd be really surprised if those two, the way they played down the stretch, especially as blockers in the running game, don't play a ton of football for Penn State, and they're going to be a big part of what should be one of the best running games in the country.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm most interested in seeing come fall whether Phil Troutwine is interested at all in that whole rotation thing where let's play most of our guys, or 5 of our guys most of the snaps, but let's bring a handful in here and there to sub in. To me, I guess it worked okay for Penn State last season, but I'll be very curious to see what his take is on that. Matt Limegrover was pretty clear about, well, if we have 6 guys that can play, we're going to play them. There's not a lot of teams that have that philosophy, so we'll see. All right, last one, and we'll get out of here. True freshman can make an impact. Looking at the January enrollees, one name that jumps out to me, Bob, Keziah Holmes, the athlete running back out of Florida. Really think that he's a guy.
Where's he going to play?
I think they could use him in the return game. I think they could use him in the pass game. I know that obviously in a perfect world you'd probably redshirt him, but I think he's going to just be too talented along with Keandre Lambert to keep off the field, the 4-star receiver out of Virginia. So time will tell, but you're right. One of the problems that Penn State has, especially with it, it's a great problem, but some of its best signees who enrolled earlier also had positions where you probably don't need them to see the field right away.
Yeah, I'm curious about Theo Johnson. I know they got him late in the process. He's a top athlete, and sometimes the top athletes at the tight end position take a little while to get going at Penn State. It was that way with Mike Gesicki. He was a little undersized. He was Theo's height, but he was only about 225 pounds. It took Adam Brenneman a little while to get going. So I'm curious about him because they're going to need a second tight end, and if it's not Zach Kuntz or it's not Brenton Strange, I'll just Freiermuth came out of nowhere in the fall of 2018. So why not this guy? The other guy that I'm just curious about. When he's not here now, but I just want to get a look. At Curtis Jacobs. I know he probably needs to add a little bit of strength. I think he's 220, 225, and they certainly have some big, fast, athletic linebackers. Even though they lose 2 starters, they certainly have some linebackers that are going to really change some things I think around on the defensive side this year, Greg. Because I think the speed they have at that position. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Yeah,
to me, it will be a shock if one of the 5 receiver signees doesn't crack the rotation to start the year. I mean, Parker Washington's not on campus yet. Malik Mega, Jaden Dotton, and Keandre Lambert are. Norval Black comes from Lackawanna this summer. To me, just looking at the way things are, unless there's a couple guys on the roster that take bigger steps forward than maybe we're expecting them to, I just have to think that the percentages say that when you bring 5 guys in, and you lost KJ Hamler, you lost Justin Shorter, you have some guys that haven't maybe contributed as much as expected in the upperclassmen group. Seems like one of those guys maybe should step forward.
I mean, Greg, we're out of January. We're closing in on the end of February, even though there's another day in February this year.
Right.
Which I don't know how I feel about a leap year because I'm just trying to get into March. But we are getting very, very close to the start of Penn State spring practice. I know you can't wait. I can't wait, and I know the fan base can't wait.